Hi. 3 big new things are coming to the MPC world. First, a new generation of MPC Live hardware with new expressive pads. More hands-on controls and hardware step sequencing. Then internally, this new generation has more processing power, memory, polyphony, and plug-in and audio tracks, and better I/O. And then finally, MPC gets a clip launcher, along with other new features and plugins, which are also being offered as a paid Pro Pack to existing first-generation MPC users. In this video, I'll take a look at all 3 in detail, as well as everything else new in Live 3, and discuss pros and cons compared to the competition. Before I start, a quick disclosure: Akai sent me Live 3. Other than that, no money changed hands. They have no say over the content of this video, and don't get to see it before it's published. But this channel is supported by members on Patreon, who, among other, have access to hundreds of MPC keygroup instruments and samples of modern analog synths. Okay, let's start with an overview of the external hardware differences between Live 2 and Live 3. Live 3 is about 1 centimeter deeper and about 1 inch wider than Live 2. This is due to direct access to more features, including 15 different modes for the top row of buttons. These are labeled here on top, and you choose them using the Set button. These include various step sequencing features and automation, matrix clip and row launching, track selection, arming and muting tracks and pads. They've got a programmable macro button mode and a few visuals options for metering. And then it's a bit wider because of the touch strip, which has multiple functions. Then there are plenty of other buttons which are shortcuts to various functions. All the new buttons have shift functionality, which you can access either using shift or by double tapping a button. Of all the MPCs, Live 2 had the fewest buttons, so this makes a refreshing difference in terms of fast navigation and sequencing. Probably the biggest news for MPC as an instrument is that the 16 pads have been totally redesigned, and they now have not only pressure and velocity sensitivity, but they're also full XY pads. As of the current firmware version 3.6, the XY functionality has been implemented in 2 places in drum type programs. One is in the mod matrix, where, as you can see here, they transmit X and Y coordinates, which you can point to a variety of destinations, including a layer crossfade option, which lets you smoothly morph between 1 or more samples, or just use the pad as 4 full quadrants to trigger 4 separate samples. You can also morph through sample layers based on distance from the center, so you can mimic acoustic instruments where hitting the center sounds different from hitting the sides. So you can trigger 2 or 4 different samples, actually 8 different samples if you really want per pad, but you can certainly use this as a 64 pad or 64 sample grid. Then the second implementation beside the mod matrix comes to us in the form of articulation effects. So you can decide for each of the 4 quadrants to activate a whole bunch of articulations, including flams, note repeats at different rates. So you can still use the note repeat feature, but you can program a different note repeat now for each of the 4 quadrants of each of the 16 pads, and not just note repeats. There are plenty of options, including pitched rolls with speed options, stereo panning, and dynamics controls. By the way, these pads are lighter to the touch than the previous generation, and I prefer these. This touch strip can do a bunch of things. We already saw note repeats. You can also use it as a pitch bend wheel, mod wheel, sustain for expression. You can use it to strum notes. So for example, and this is configurable, so we can pitch it up, choose a different scale. And you can also use it as a crossfader, just like in Force. So now the mixer, if you head on out to the pan and volume page, can be either in both mode or send audio just to the A side or just to the B side. And you can see which I picked both here and on top. And then you can crossfade between A and B. You can also use this as a macro generally or to control queue links, and you also use it in combination with the step sequencer, as I'll show you in a bit. The next new thing in Live 3 compared to Live 2 is the built-in microphone. So if we go on and take a look at the inputs, you can see it's picking me up now. You can increase the gain if you want. Let's reduce it a bit. And I think it's a very high quality microphone. If I turn on monitoring for a second, and I'll shut my microphone off. So right now my mouth is about this far away from the microphone. And for some ASMR, you've also got combo jacks on the back now, so you can use those along with phantom power if you want. The next big thing that's new in Live 3 is that it's got an 8-core CPU instead of just 4-core on Live 2, and 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of just 2 on Live 2 or 4 on some other MPCs. So that's considerably more processing power. You can now load up to 32 plugin tracks instead of just 8 on the first generation MPCs, and you can add up to 16 audio tracks instead of just 8 on the first generation. The built-in internal drive is also much bigger. It's 128 gigabytes for project and sample storage compared to only 16 gigabytes on Live 2, which is a big deal because just the expansion packs it comes with, as well as the synths in the content bundle, all those together take up a lot of storage and RAM when you load them up. You can still expand this either using the internal SATA drive slot on the bottom or using an SD card or USB, but after installing everything here, I've still got more than 75 gigs free, so there's a lot to play with. By the way, when you turn on Live 3, a fan spins up for a few seconds and it's quite loud, but I've tried to stress test it with 32 plugins and way more polyphony that it can handle, which is 256, Akai says, and the fan didn't spin up for me. Speaking of speed, the interface is way more zippy and kits load up really fast. So they've sped up load times considerably as well. So up until now, everything I mentioned is new on the physical hardware side. The next big bit of news is that there are a whole set of new features on the software side or firmware side, mainly finally a clip launcher, but also new CV features, better time stretch, and a few new effects plugins. We'll check out all of these later. And the good news is all of these new features, including the clip launcher, are going to be made available as a paid Pro Pack upgrade to the first generation of MPCs. Obviously, getting all these features as a free update would have been better news for existing MPC users, but I think that Akai doing this is great as opposed to not giving current MPC users access to this feature set at all. One new feature that isn't being made available to first generation MPCs is the new Pro Stem separation. Akai says this requires the processing power of the new processor. We'll take a listen to it in a bit. Let's take a quick look at connectivity. On the back, we've got 6 separately addressable line outputs, 2 sampling input channels. These can be either the microphone or combo jacks we talked about earlier, or RCA jacks. So the combo jacks and microphone are new for Live 3. Then like in Live 2, you've got 2 MIDI DIN inputs, 2 MIDI outputs, and 4 CV gate output jacks, which can send out 8 channels if you've got a TRS to TS splitter cable like this one. Like on Live 2, you've got an SD card slot and 2 USB Type-A jacks to hook up MIDI devices for storage and to connect an audio interface to replace the built-in I/O. Then you've got a new USB-C jack, unlike the Type-B jack on Live 2, and that USB-C jack can do a lot more. You can sample audio over USB from your computer or a phone. This talks to USB host devices, not USB devices, so it won't talk to synths that are USB devices, but then a computer or phone should work. And you can send out 24 channels of audio and 32 channels of MIDI over USB-C. You can also see any drives connected to Live 3 over USB-C, including the 2 internal partitions. And then unlike Live 2, we lost the Ethernet port, but this does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Wi-Fi works for firmware updates and content downloads, though you can't transfer files over Wi-Fi, unfortunately. Hopefully they add that. Wi-Fi also syncs transport wirelessly using Ableton Link, and you can use Bluetooth for MIDI, but not to access the speakers or to sample over Bluetooth. The speakers, by the way, I think are similar to those in Live 2. They sound great in my opinion with excellent bass and are very usable, and like Live 2, Live 3 also has a built-in rechargeable battery. In terms of content, Live 3 comes with 15 expansion packs, and it also comes with all the plugins that are bundled with the special edition MPC XL and MPC Key 61. One of these expansion packs is the MPCe kits, which includes plenty of kits that leverage the MPCe pads. And these also include template kits. These are kits that set up things in the mod matrix or articulations so that you can just simply drop, say, 4 samples into 4 quadrants, or load up 2 samples in a center and edge layout, and it does all the heavy lifting in the mod matrix for you. So if you don't want to mess with the mod matrix, then you've got these presets. It's not that difficult though. So the idea is that you choose a source, and the source can be any one of these pad parameters. Pad X and Y are simply the XY coordinates of where your finger is up and down or left and right on the pad. And then you've got distance from the center for those sounds where you want one sample here and another sample on the edge, or to crossfade between the two. You've also got a distance from where you pressed. So if I press in the corner here, that'll be the starting point. I can drag away from the corner, or away from this corner, or away from the center if I want, as opposed to an absolute distance from the center. And then you've got a distance from where you pressed on the x-axis or on the y-axis. So let's say go for pad X, and I point that to layer crossfade X. Notice how it crossfades between the 2 samples that I've loaded up here, layer 2 and layer 1. And the crossfade is a parameter that you access here in the layer play parameter. So it's a new option they've added in this firmware. And there are 4 crossfade options here between 1, 2, and 3, and 4. If you want to use 8 samples, you can crossfade between those in various different ways, including 8 samples all across the pad. For us, let's go with a sample per quadrant. Anyway, right now we're crossfading between the 2 samples, but if we just wanted to play either one sample or the other, we can load up a 50/50 shaper, and that'll make sure that there's a sharp transition between sample 1 and sample 2, as opposed to the linear transition previously. Anyway, so you can mess with this on your own, or just load one of the presets. This one, for example, doesn't do anything in the mod matrix because you access note repeats using articulations like I showed you earlier. So for example, this preset will give you none in one quadrant, 8 note triplets, 16ths, and 16th triplets per each of the quadrants. This, by the way, is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So these templates are a great way to get started, but hopefully I explained to you how to make all of these on your own if you like. As you may have guessed, cutoff and resonance work like this. You can edit the mod depth, by the way, to choose the direction of the modulation and the depth, and any of the targets that are available in the mod matrix are available to you as targets for the MPCe pads. This doesn't currently, at least, include the effects slots or any other program type besides drum programs. Hopefully that's something we'll see added in the future. Okay, let's move on and take a deeper look at how to use the new step buttons. You choose a mode by either holding set and choosing the mode, or pressing set and then choosing the mode. The first mode is a drum sequencer. The way this works is pretty simple. You choose the pad you want to sequence and just add the steps onto the sequencer wherever you'd like them to be, and you've got a pattern running. You can then add some more. Now, if you choose an articulation, then you can sequence that. So let's say add this one here, and then add this one, say here. So you can sequence articulations this way as well, and sample quadrants as well. So let's say drop this one here and this one here. So that's how you add steps using the step buttons. You can hold a step and use the touch strip to set its velocity. You can tie notes by holding a first step and linking it to another step. If your pattern is more than 16 steps, you can always move to the next bar or previous bar, and you can follow the cursor or just lock it into a specific bar. Now, actually, these aren't bars, but rather whatever unit it is that you set in timing correct. And you can move back and forth between these. So if I move to eighths, you can see that this zooms out or zooms in if I go to 30 seconds. And of course, all these are added onto the grid, so anything I do with the step buttons will be reflected on screen. It's just more convenient using these than using the screen. By the way, we still have the old touchscreen step sequencer, so you can always use that as well. Then finally for drum sequencing, if I were to add, say, a melodic track, then I could step sequence individual notes as well if I wanted. Let's just add these. But a better way would be to use the note sequencing mode. So let's remove these for now. Oh, and one more thing for drum sequencing. You can audition a step by holding the step and pressing these buttons. Or if I go back to my drum sequence, then you can hold the step and preview the step, including any other sounds on it. Anyway, on to note sequencing. This works for the drum pads as well, but let's go to my piano. So the way this works is you choose a first step and just sequence away. And this is velocity sensitive. So this is my pattern. This is what it looks like here. This also works based on the timing correction. So if I wanted to play longer notes, then I can do that. Don't press do it, just press close. Otherwise it will quantize the pattern. Choose a start step. It'll light up in bright white. Or if I just want to practice, then I can turn that off and practice some ideas. And I can also program chords, and it sequences step by step based on timing correction. So that's my wonderful pattern now. If you turn off timing correction, then chords you enter will be strummed. So let's go to this step because there's nothing here, and quickly strum something. So that's that. Here we go. If we don't like a step, by the way, we can always erase it, even though I do. So let's undo that. Okay, let's move on to the next step mode, and that's step edit mode. This doesn't work too well for melodic sequences. It's optimized more for drum beats. But I could edit the velocity, ratchets, probability, and nudge the ticks for this particular note, or any other time that I played that note. For example, here. This is more intuitive for drums. So let's go back to my drum track. And we get more parameters than just velocity, ratchets, probability, and nudge ticks. We get a bunch of modifiers if we want, and mod settings. So I could, for example, choose to change the tuning of this step, or maybe add ratchets to it. 2 ratchets or more. Doesn't sound that great on a kick, but I think you get the idea. Anyway, that's step edit. Then there's note length mode, which, as the name implies, lets you set the length for any notes that you entered. Then last step lets you shorten or increase the length of the pattern. So our pattern is 16 steps, so we could make it 6 if we wanted. 8, 7, 11. You can't set different lengths for each of the different pads, but if you wanted, you could explode this to multiple tracks and give each one a different length, which is cool for polymetric variations. Anyway, the next step mode is automation. Unlike step edit, which only gave us access to a few parameters, this gives us access to any parameter that we want that's available within the program, including effects parameters. So we could automate the delay mix, for example, add automation and choose the value per step. Let's add a bit here. Now, of course, this all appears on the grid as well. So if I were to open this up and then choose our newly added delay, you could see the automation here as well. Anyway, let's move on and talk about clip launching. So the idea here is that rather than using the touchscreen, which may be imprecise, we use these buttons. And you can see that as I change tracks, these will light up to show where I've got active clips. The next step mode is row launch mode, which, as the name implies, will launch an entire row. So again, rather than finding the right row here, we just press one of these. Next up, one of my favorites, track select, which just selects the active track, and that works regardless of which mode you're in. So you no longer have to hold main and choose a track. You can just use these to quickly hop between tracks. Next up is track arm. That will arm one, or with shift, more tracks for recording. Then you've got track mute mode and pad mute mode, which is, I think, self-explanatory. Next sequence mode uses these buttons to choose sequences if you have them programmed. I don't, so these will just come up empty. And then QLink pad grid is a fun one. So what this does is lets you program each of these buttons, and there's banks of them if you want, to behave as a macro for one or more parameters. So let's say, for example, here, this is our beat, and we wanted to control flex beat with one of our step buttons as a macro controller. Programming these is pretty easy. You just hit Shift and press the button. It goes into learn mode. It shows you that it's in learn mode by blinking, and then you just touch what you want it to learn. Shift and press it again to stop learning, and then this is our beat. Flex beat is on now, and we can press this to turn it off. And you can see that it's momentary now. So this is on and this is off. If we wanted this to behave like a toggle, we could go into QLink edit, go for our pad grid, and we can see what we've learned here, which is turning this effect on and off. And if we open this little window, we can turn this into a toggle. So now this is off and we've toggled it on and toggle it off. It would be nice if the button changed color based on the toggle status, but it works. Let's maybe learn one more thing into it. Let's also activate the reverb. So let's map this Shift Learn into either on, off, or mix. Let's go for mix in this case and stop learning. Anyway, now this turns the mix on and off as well. You can see that this, the reverb part, is not a toggle. Again, if we want to change this, go into QLink edit, pad grid. You can see it's controlling two parameters now. Select the reverb and change that to toggle as well. So this is a fun one. It turns every one of these buttons into a performance controller. And if you're confused about what they do, just go into this mode and you can see what's going on here. Anyway, last and final is the visuals mode. You've got one of several modes. Colorful, various meters, stereo meters, left and right, and so on. And edit actions isn't a mode, it just gets you into the track edit menu. Okay, moving on, let's take a closer look at the clip matrix, one of my favorite new features of Live 3. This has been available since the beginning on Force and is now also available as part of the Pro Pack upgrade for first generation MPC users or in Live 3. It's obviously similar to Ableton Live's session grid. The idea is to let you easily swap out various ideas or explore the progression of your song by launching different rows in the grid. And obviously you can pick and choose various ideas from the different tracks. Now this matrix lives alongside the arranger. As a matter of fact, if I press all tracks to arranger, we can listen to the arrangement. And the arrangement is actually a bunch of clips that live in the first row of the matrix. You can see that it says arrange over here. So this is one of the demo projects. Let's start a new empty project and see how we use the clip matrix. So by default, when you start a new project, we're recording to the arranger, not into the matrix. If you want to add an idea into a clip, you can just press an empty slot from within the matrix view. Or if you're on the main page, you can also move out of the arrangement into an empty clip. Now you can choose whether you want to record a fixed length clip and how long you want it to be. Let's just go for 1 bar in this case. Or if you want to just play for as long as you want, turn fixed length to off. For now, let's hit record. And we've recorded a clip and that appears in the matrix as well. We could have done that from the matrix too. So just hit record and play. And we've got another idea to play with, or go back to the original one. There's a really fun workflow of creating new takes or adding to an existing layer by hitting this button, duplicate clip to next slot. So if we peek in the matrix, we see we've got another copy here. Anyway, back to main, and we can now choose to overdub this clip. Let's hit play and say add a few note repeats. So that's one idea here and our original idea here. And that's how we can build a progression in a song. From here, it's very easy to add more tracks, build out our ideas. Again, by default, recording is into the arranger, but if we want, we can record into a clip. Let's say go into notes, choose chords, and let's maybe turn off fixed length. So let's say do this. And if we're happy with the loop, hit record, and it'll start looping. Let's say that we're done putting together our ideas. Our arrangement is still empty. Before you record into it, you'll want to make sure there's enough room for your ideas. So extend the sequence beyond what you think you'll need. And then just hit record into arranger and start performing clips or playing the pads on various tracks directly into the arrangement. And let's zoom out here. That is our performance. Let's look at a few more matrix features. You can copy clips around if you want, and of course paste them with a long press. I can clear out a clip if I want my progression to go cleanly based on rows. I could set a tempo per row if I wanted, change its color, which is important, of course, and add follow actions if I wanted something to happen immediately after a row is played. And then a quick word about live looping. If I add an audio track, then I can record ideas directly into clips. I won't sing, but let's try my improvised cowbell. As you can see, I spare no expense on props. Anyway, my point was that while overdub works for MIDI clips, drum programs, plugin programs, and so on, you can't overdub into audio tracks, but it's very easy just to continue adding audio tracks, especially now that you can add 16 of them, and then continue to add layers by adding more tracks. So, for example, I now have these two layers together, and I could add this. And I think with a little mixing, we might be onto something. Recording audio tracks, by the way, also works whether in fixed length mode or as long as you want, and press record when you're done. Now, another side benefit of this matrix that Force users have been enjoying for a while is the snapshots function. Let me maybe go into here and swap this out for Jura. Let's copy this into here so we have everything in a nice row. So this is what we've got now in this row. Anyway, I can grab a snapshot of this and then go into Jura and mess with parameters as much as I want, explore ideas, and if I didn't like what I did, just go back into here and relaunch the row, and things would go back to normal. Now, if I made changes that I liked, let's take a snapshot and say this definitely needs work in the mix. Anyway, if I like this, then I could just go back into here and clear the snapshot, and then the changes will have been committed. So Snapshots is a fantastic performance and experimentation feature. Another fun creative feature is insert and capture. So let's say that I want this, but I want these drums and this clip, which is the same as this one. Anyway, I could now go into here, select insert and capture, and it would grab the clips that I selected into a new row. Few other settings. If we go into clip settings, you can quantize the launching into any one of these settings or turn it off. And you can also turn on legato, which will move between clips in a way where playback is picked up from the same position as the previous clip left off, like this. A few more matrix features. If we hit pads and go into clip launch mode, then you've got a 4x4 view into the grid, and you can move around either with these arrows or with these unlit bank buttons, up, down, and left and right. Anyway, you can launch clips this way. It would certainly be nice if they added an 8x8 view using the quadrants. And then if you like, you can copy clips to the arrangement. For some reason, you can't copy a arrangement into a clip from here, but you can from the arrangement if you like. Copy arrangement to clip. What else? There are a few matrix settings over here, and this is a kind of hidden one. If you go into the main screen and long press a track's name, you can exclude it from a row launch if you want. The menu also has a navigation option if your grid gets really big. And one more bit of trivia, if you hold Shift and press load clips, then if a kit has clips that go along with it, let's see if we get lucky here, then you'll get one or more demo clips that go along with the kit. And one more thing before we part ways with arrangement and clips. The arrangement is stored in a sequence, but the matrix is global. So if I go ahead and start a new sequence, an unused sequence, my arrangement will be empty, but the matrix still has all the old clips we had before. So I could now say if I wanted perform into another arrangement, and that will live side by side next to the old one. The next new feature is super time stretch. So I resampled the default factory project here. And making it faster is relatively easy, but it sounds good. Let's make it slower. There are some clicks when you change tempo, but overall I think it sounds very good. So this is the super stretch, if you want to compare it. This is Pro 10, and we need to restart for it to kick in. You can hear the choppiness compared to super, which sounds much better. So that's time stretch. There's also a new stem separation algorithm. So let's say take this part, create stems, and let's put it into here. I'm going to fast forward through this. So these are all four together. And let's say, just listen to the vocals. Definitely some artifacts. I did compare this to the previous one, and it does sound better though. Okay, a few more new things. We've got a few new effects. The Air Reverb Pro. Let's take a quick listen to that. So this is without. This is with. Let's turn the mix to the middle. Decay can go long. So now we've got a proper cavernous delay. There are a bunch of parameters here that are available for exploration. We've also got a visual EQ with multiple presets. And hidden in the Q-Link edit screen is an envelope follower and LFO. And the idea is that you can choose a source, let's say this pad. Anyway, it's basically a mod source that's following the level coming out of this pad. We can set an attack and decay to smoothen it out. And then use this as a sidechain source. You could also use vocals as a source here and say apply it to duck the mix of a reverb or delay. And as its name suggests, you can also choose to use an LFO. And you point this, as usual for mod sources, to any destination you learn or just pick manually. Okay, moving on, let's take a quick look at the CV Playground. This gives you a new set of CV tools, which people working with modular gear are going to like. You've got a few basic controls here on the main page, whether you want to sequence a melodic instrument or a drum instrument, and you can choose which pads go to which ports or which CV gate pairs go to which ports. And if we edit this track, you can choose the routing, meaning what of all of these goes into which of the outputs, and you can choose one of four LFOs, four envelopes, the step sequencer, and once you select your source of choice, you can then edit it in one of the tabs. The envelopes are ADSR envelopes with delay and hold, And you've got 4 of them, 4 LFOs with the usual suspect shapes. The voltage step sequencer, which you can tune to taste. It goes up to 16 steps, and you can apply smoothing or slew between steps. Then you've got a bunch of utilities, 2 ramps, clock divider, offsets, and then the matrix lets you either sum or multiply 2 sources. So you can use this, for example, to create a complex LFO from 2 LFO shapes, or to control the depth of one source with another source. Then finally, before we head out to the pros and cons, it's worth mentioning that Akai is also making available the MPC Desktop software, so you can use Live 3 in controller mode to control the software. The software is in beta and it still doesn't have a clip launcher, but you can use the clip launcher here in parallel with the software. Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons of Live 3. On the pros side, it's arguably the ultimate grab-and-go music-making platform. Besides all the features I just showed you, it's battery-powered, it's got great speakers, and is relatively portable. It checks so many boxes, it's hard to find something comparable. The main thing the MPC platform was lacking so far, in my opinion, up until now, was the clip-launching workflow, which its competitors like Push3 and Machine and even Force have had for years. This is great for exploring musical ideas, creating multiple takes, and it fits together nicely with the onboard arranger workflow, which I think is better than Machine's and which Push3 standalone doesn't have at all. Push3 is still a better companion for Ableton Live, but if you want a hardware-only workflow on the go, Push3 doesn't give you any arranger access, nor microphone or speakers. Compared to the previous generation of Live, which only allowed you 8 plugin tracks and 8 audio tracks, now you've got much more breathing room if you want to create a complex piece, not to mention that everything is much faster. Then beside that, the expressive pads, additional controls, and additional connectivity add true value compared to the previous generation of MPCs. By the way, the previous generation doesn't stop being good just because this came out, especially if you upgrade them with the Pro Pack. So those are the pros. What about the cons? On the hardware side, the one thing I like about some of the competition, including Force and MPCX, is that they have more knobs and that they always let you see what they do with little OLED screens under the knobs. Now, MPC does show you this little pop-up, which tells you what the Q-links do in each of their 4 modes. But as you can see, sometimes they don't do anything. You need to either hold them and page around to see what they do, or long press, and then this will open up. When you zoom out and see all 16, it makes sense. For the MPCX, of course, this works great. But on many of the pages, like this page or the main page, I just find myself not using these much. Same goes for the grid editor or the arranger. It would have been great to just always see what these do. Now, this isn't a problem at all if you go ahead and edit the plugins. There, the workflow is great. Actually, I don't think you need the pop-up when you're controlling the plugin pages because it's pretty clear what the Q-links are mapped to. I actually think they should add a mode to disable the pop-up in screens like these. Now, of course, compared to some other devices, you've got a multi-touch screen, which compensates significantly for the small number of knobs. But in practice for me, the knobs just don't get much use on screens where they don't control something where their mapping is visible. Beside that, I can't find much to complain about. Maybe it would have been nice if these buttons would have been on the bottom and the screen tilted, but I have to admit it's not that big of a deal, and these being on top makes the pads and touchscreen closer and more accessible. So it's kind of a wash. For example, everything's up front on Force and Push, but their screen is quite far away. Then finally, on the hardware side, only 2 inputs at a time is limiting if you want to use this as a studio centerpiece, though you can expand this over USB with a class-compliant interface or mixer. Then on the firmware wishlist side, my main request is that we be allowed to do more with these pads outside of drum programs. Obviously, this is just the first generation of firmware with these, and spoiler alert, Akai did tell me they're planning to invest in expanding what they can do in future firmwares, so here's my wish list. First, it would be great to see them as a general mod source in the system, so you could use XY to control anything. Then it would be great to see these send out MPE on MIDI tracks, and of course see them as sources on CV tracks. And then one can hope we also see MPE capabilities implemented, maybe not in pianos, but say in the drum synths or other plugins that are available here. Then beside that, I'd like to see an 8x8 notes mode. We could easily fit 8 notes per octave in scale modes and have 8 octaves here, or maybe a 4-octave chromatic layout where these quadrants would give you the white notes and these quadrants the black notes. And then finally, as long as I'm making this video, I'd love for retrospective record to work better, basically like Capture MIDI does in Ableton or Move, specifically to auto-detect tempo when transport isn't running, and to auto-clear the buffer if you haven't played for a few seconds. So that's it for Live 3 and the Pro Pack for first generation MPCs, both upgrades well worth considering. I've got literally hundreds of multi-sampled modern analog instruments available for the MPC platform and other multi-samplers on my Patreon, where you'll also find my ever-expanding book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks. Hit like if this was useful, and don't forget to ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.
He say I'm the best indeed, now he wanna bag it. Say he wanna invest in me, spend a couple bags, yeah. Cause city boys live for the city girl. Life move fast when you're having fun. They all love all the pretty girls. Better make me your number one. Jump well, cause you know we on top, yeah.